Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'd like to talk to you about safety. So, as a new gun owner, or anybody that has any exposure to firearms, there are 5 things that I feel are absolutely essential to being learned first and foremost. So we talk a lot about safety in our classes, but a lot of times somebody has to actually come to a class to really hear that type of information being put out as far as safety is concerned. So I start by reviewing the 4 safety rules. Number 1, treat all guns as if they're always loaded. Number 2, maintain the muzzle in a safe direction. Now, you also have to be able to define what a safe direction is. So a safe direction will be a location where should you fire a shot, will cause minimal property damage and no injury or loss of life. Number 3, maintain the trigger finger on the home position until you're ready to fire. So 2 parts there. What defines ready to fire? For us, you've located, identified a target, moved the gun from point of carry to the target, then confirmed your sights. At which point, now you're ready to fire. The last one, positive target ID. So again, be sure of your target and what's beyond. So those are the 4 safety rules. But let's talk about, as a new shooter, what should I be focusing on with safety and the handgun? So the first thing that I would encourage you to understand is, what is the condition or the status of the firearm? Is the gun loaded? How do you know? Well, you're going to have to become familiar with the operation of the firearm. Is there a magazine in the firearm to start with? Because if there is, you're probably going to want to assume that it is loaded. If there's a chamber indicator, you might be able to look at the chamber indicator and determine that there is a round in the chamber or not a round in the chamber. I recommend that until you're very comfortable using that to confirm the condition of the firearm, that you still would want to do a visual inspection of the chamber. And that means that you're going to have to operate the firearm. So that's number 1. Number 2, maintain that muzzle in a safe direction. That becomes probably the most important thing that we can talk about. And I cannot tell you how easy it is for people to either overlook or flat out ignore this rule. Wherever that muzzle is pointed is where that projectile is going to go. Now, even if you don't mean to fire the shot, the reason why muzzle discipline is so important is because we are human, we are fallible, we're capable of making a mistake. Should I fire a shot because I failed to follow some of the other rules, if I maintain that muzzle in a safe direction, the damage is minimal. And it's a good lesson learned. So my recommendation is to really drive that point home. The third one has to do mainly with, how do I load the gun, right? So maybe I want to take the gun to the firearm and I want to actually do some training, or maybe I want to use this firearm as a home defense weapon and I want to make sure that it's loaded. So again, you're going to have to become more familiar with the operation of the firearm. Now, the second step that I talked about, which was maintain a muzzle discipline, comes into play here. Because anytime you're handling that firearm, you always want to maintain muzzle discipline. But another thing that we need to talk about is the condition of my trigger finger. We see a lot of people move their trigger finger into that home position, into the trigger guard on the trigger. And anytime you're handling the gun, that is a recipe for disaster. So read the owner's manual so that you can understand all the features and the controls on your firearm, and then learn how to properly insert the magazine, charge the firearm. Now, hand in hand with loading is unloading. You're going to need to learn how to unload the firearm. So again, maintain that muzzle discipline, move the finger to the home position, and then learn how to remove the magazine, eject the round, and then visually inspect or visually clear the chamber. So the last thing that we talk about that you really want to develop as a new shooter is that trigger finger position, which is what we call the home position. Now, what is so important to understand about that home position, and the home position to us is defined as the intersection between the slide and the frame. Where those 2 parts meet is where you want your trigger finger. Why is this important? Well, we have a survival instinct that has been allowing us to survive all these thousands of years. Part of that survival instinct is not controllable by you. You're not going to be able to stop yourself from being startled, because that startle reflex is initiating a fight or flight kind of output, if you will. And that's something that you're not going to be able to control. So for 3 reasons, we really want to maintain that home position. One, if I'm startled, I'm going to have this full body clenching action. That's going to result in my hands clenching. Wherever my hands clench, they're going to be clenching with enough force to pull the trigger should my finger be in the trigger guard or touching the trigger guard. The second is if I lose my balance. If I trip and fall, again, in anticipation of hitting the ground, I'm going to clench. So if my finger is in the trigger guard or on the trigger guard, I'm probably going to discharge a round. And the last one has to do with interlimb interaction. Whatever I do really hard with this hand, I'll do equally hard with that hand. So if I'm trying to pull myself up or push somebody away, I'm probably going to displace that same amount of force in my strong hand. So if my finger's on the trigger or inside the trigger guard or on the trigger guard, I can probably expect a discharge to happen. So these are kind of like the big things that I want all new shooters to give some thought into. What means the most to me is that we welcome as many new shooters into the community as possible. But I know that there's probably some concern for safety. This is a great way to address those safety concerns to help create an environment that you feel comfortable training, practicing, learning, participating in. And that's the ultimate goal that we want, is we want everybody to be welcome into the community. We want everybody to have a safe experience. We want everybody to enjoy the sport, the art of shooting. So take these to heart, learn more about them, understand them, and then practice them anytime you're handling firearms or you're around other people handling firearms. All right, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them down below. Until then, take care and stay safe.